A lot of people did have complaints below my first comparison between these two handhelds. And the reason for that is that I used an older BIOS version for the ROG Ally, which is because that was the newest version when I recorded the Ally footage, and was replaced by a faster one like 3 days before I published my video. However, I promised to redo this video once both handhelds did get further BIOS updates, and some of the results really surprised me. So here we are, let's go!
This is Hubwood.
But before we begin, the BIOS for the ROG Ally was version 335 from early December this time, and the version for the Legion Go was N3CN28WW from early December as well. I was also using the newest officially available AMD Radeon graphic drivers for both of them. Now, when you are watching this video, there might even be newer BIOS versions available already, as Lenovo is really working very hard on that these days, but I think that at least the performance in most games won't differ that much anymore from what you can see today. Considering the Legion Go, there might have been some big changes in terms of functionality though. But that's a different topic and not part of this video. And also some people were complaining that I was only testing the games at 720p, so today we are both looking at 720p and 1080p, and each of these with both the 30-watt performance custom modes and also the 15-watt balanced mode on both devices. Well, except for Avatar, and you will shortly see why. However, it is important to keep in mind that the Legion Go has a higher resolution screen, so it would always have to push out a few more pixels compared to the ROG Ally, even when using the lowest resolutions for both handhelds, which would be 720p for the Ally and 800p for the Legion Go, or 1080p for the Ally and 1200p for the Legion Go, if we use them without an external monitor or a capture card, which is around 11% more pixels to render for the Legion Go, let alone its native 1600p resolution. I was again recording the footage via an external capture card, so that the performance is identical to using the integrated screen only. Both handhelds have been plugged in for all tests as well, and I've set the VRAM for both devices to 6 GB this time, with the exception of Baldur's Gate 3, where you'd really want to set it to 3 GB instead, believe me. Furthermore, I've set the fan curves in both devices to the maximum fan speed. And without further blah blah, let's just jump right into the benchmarks. Round 2, fight!
Now the first game we're going to look at today is gonna be the brand new Assassin's Creed Mirage, which really works pretty well on both handhelds. And at 720p medium settings and FSR quality, with the 30-watt performance profiles activated, I saw an average of 69 FPS with 1% lows of around 44 FPS for the ROG Ally and 70 FPS on average with 1% lows of around 40 FPS for the Lenovo Legion Go, which is absolutely perfectly playable for sure, even on medium settings. And running the 15-watt balanced mode seemed to work alright as well in that scenario, with 51 FPS on average for the ROG Ally and 53 FPS on average for the Legion Go, with 1% lows of around 27 to 30 FPS for both of them. And even at 1080p with medium settings and FSR on performance using the 30-watt modes, the game was performing pretty okay on both handhelds, with an average of 61 FPS on the Ally with 1% lows of 33 FPS and 63 FPS on average with 1% lows of 38 FPS on the Legion Go. And last but not least, using the 15-watt balanced mode with identical settings, the ROG Ally still scored 45 FPS, whereas the Legion Go fell way behind in that case with only 36 FPS on average, but spoiler up front, in other games it looked a lot better for the Legion Go when using the 15-watt mode. Now let's just take a quick look at the also brand new Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, for which I was trying to use the integrated benchmark again, and it didn't really work on either the ROG Ally nor the Legion Go. It has just been a stuttery mess even at 720p with the lowest settings and FSR enabled. The stuttering really made it unbearable on both devices, while the ROG Ally seemed to hold up a bit better than the Legion Go. But still, I think you'd face a lot of areas inside the game that would be pretty unplayable. Though this game is pretty new, so we could at least hope for game and AMD driver updates to fix that in the future. Now actually playing the game seemed to work a bit better, as you can see here, with the first few minutes actually take place inside a facility, and once you're outside in this area it really starts to get these heavy stutterings from time to time, which we really don't want in an FPS game. So it's really unplayable. And that's a shame, since it actually looks beautiful and the average FPS aren't even that bad. But anyhow, let's just jump to the next game instead, which was Baldur's Gate 3, for which I was setting the VRAM on both handhelds to 3 GB, and I would highly recommend doing so if you'd want to play this game on either of them. For this test I was using my walk through the city of Baldur's Gate in Act 3, which is probably the most demanding part of the game. Now, using the 30 watt mode at 720p with low settings and FSR unbalanced, I was getting around 41 FPS on average on the ROG Ally, with a 1% low of around 28 FPS, and just slightly higher 44 FPS on average for the Legion Go, with 1% lows of about 31 FPS. Now, when I was using the 15 watt balanced mode instead, and I really have to point out that Lenovo seems to have improved that since the last comparison, because even using this one instead resulted in a higher 37 FPS on average for the Legion Go over the Ally's now 33 FPS on average, while the 1% lows have been pretty similar in that case, with around 23 to 25 FPS for both of them. Meaning the game is still playable on both of them, even in this highly demanding run through the Act 3 of the game. At 1080p and low settings, using the 30 watt mode with FSR and performance, the Ally scored around 34 FPS on average, with 1% lows of only around 18, and the Legion Go scored a 12% higher 38 FPS on average, with 22 or 23 FPS for the 1% lows. And using the 15 watt modes at 1080p resulted in only 27 FPS on average for the Ally and only 18 FPS for the 1% lows, which is, well, probably still kinda playable considering it's one of the most demanding areas of the game and you don't need a super fluid gameplay for this title. In this scenario, the Legion Go was able to still achieve 30 FPS on average and 20 FPS for the 1% lows. And while we're at it, I also want to mention that loading these save games took around 5 minutes each time on either handheld for whatever reason. So you'd have to be the patient kind with this one. Next up was Cyberpunk 2077, in which I was using the integrated benchmark. At 720p, medium settings and FSR unbalanced, I saw an average of 71 FPS on the ROG Ally and 73 FPS on the Legion Go, with both having pretty good 1% lows of almost 50 FPS. Now the game is even playable that way using the 15 watt mode with the same settings, resulting in 49 FPS on average on the Ally, with 33 FPS for the 1% lows and 48 FPS on the Legion Go with 1% lows of 30 FPS. So this time around the Ally seemed to have a super tiny advantage, though 1 FPS is to be considered within the margin of error really. Now for 1080p I was also using the medium settings, but this time with FSR and performance, and the 30 watt mode resulted in an average FPS of 52 for the Ally and 55 FPS for the Legion Go, while the Ally's 1% lows have been around 40 FPS and the Go's at around 36 FPS. And in this configuration, but with the 15 watt mode, I still got somewhat playable 35 FPS on average on the Ally and 34 FPS on average on the Legion Go, while once again the 1% lows were a bit higher on the ROG Ally with 26 over 21 FPS. Now Forza Horizon 5 really runs remarkably well on both the ASUS ROG Ally and the Lenovo Legion Go. Once more, I was using the integrated benchmark at medium settings at 720p. And with the 30 watt performance modes, I saw an average of 83 FPS on the Ally and 79 FPS on the Legion Go, meaning the Ally really had a small lead in this case this time around. And while we're at it, I double and triple checked all these benchmarks, leading to over 100 benchmark runs in total, so liking the video really helps others to find it with the YouTube algorithm. So thanks up front for that. Surprisingly, the results were identical for both handhelds when I was using the 15 watt balanced mode instead, resulting in an average of 66 FPS for both the Ally and the Legion Go, with even identical 1% lows of 53 FPS. Now, even at 1080p, Forza Horizon 5 is one of the few AAA titles that actually run with more than 60 FPS on medium settings on these gaming handhelds. 69 FPS on the Ally and 67 FPS on the Legion Go on average for 1080p and medium settings. Pretty neat. 1% lows have been almost identical once more, with 58 for the Ally and 56 for the Legion Go, meaning it really ran super fluid with no stuttering whatsoever. And even using the handhelds at 15 watt results in playable FPS at 1080p with an average of 51 for the Ally and 49 FPS on the Legion Go. So overall, the Ally is a bit better with Forza Horizon 5, but they're both handling it really well. And I also fired up Starfield while we are once more beginning with the 720p and 30 watt benchmark at low settings with FSR enabled. For that, I was taking a walk in the first big city you'll get to at the beginning of the game. On the ROG Ally, that resulted in an average of 42 FPS and a 1% low of 30 FPS, while on the Legion Go I saw a slightly higher 46 FPS on average and a 1% low of 32 FPS. Using the 15 watt mode in that scenario, the performance was perfectly equal on both handhelds with 31 FPS on average and a 1% low of 21 FPS on both handhelds alike. Probably a good idea to cap the FPS at 30 in that case either way. Now at 1080p low settings and FSR activated using the 30 watt mode, the game was still playable with 37 FPS on average for the Ally and a 1% low of 25 FPS, while the Legion Go once more scored a slightly higher 40 FPS on average with a 1% low of 28 FPS. Still doable for most people, I guess. Now, here using the 15 watt balanced mode resulted in only 28 FPS on average for the Ally and 29 FPS for the Legion Go, which is just on the brink of being playable for most people out there.
Alright, what's today's conclusion? Well, testing these 6 games isn't super representative of all the available games out there, I'm aware of that. But there are just too many games to test, especially if I want to do that for different resolutions and different wattage modes, as people just use these handhelds in too many different ways to cover all of that. I still think that the Legion Go could have a tiny performance advantage once the BIOS versions are both equally developed, just due to the faster RAM, which in most use cases would of course be neglected by the higher resolution it has to render. And then the Ally does of course support VRR, which can make up for lower FPS in my opinion. And yes, I know that the faster RAM can sometimes even lead to lower FPS, especially on the lower power modes for the Legion Go, but that's a story for another video. If this comparison was helpful, please make sure to like this video so others can find it as well. Thank you. Also subscribe for more benchmark videos, laptop reviews and handheld related stuff in the future. If you haven't yet checked out my video in which I'm reviewing the Viture XR glasses in combination with the Legion Go and the Ally, make sure to watch that next because that was a real game changer for me. I will link to it in the end card and the description of this video. Alright, and that's all for today. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye bye and tschüss.